Namaste. Greetings on behalf of the Campus Law Center and the Bharat Book Club, an initiative of Historical India. We welcome you all to the university book launch of Snakes in the Ganga, Breaking India 2.0, followed by conversations with Rajiv Malhotra sir. The Bharat Book Club, an initiative of Historical India, is a forum for students and scholars who share an enthusiasm for readership and deliberation of ideas. Based in the University of Delhi, the club aims at reviving the culture of reading and research. From hosting book launches to introducing and reintroducing literature, publishing book reviews, enhancing bibliographic research, to initiating novel bibliophile endeavors, forge the essence of Bharat Book Club. Historical India is a community-based digital wiki platform stimulating an exclusive discourse on multidisciplinary history. It's a platform where one can create and edit wiki articles, ensuring that this discourse reaches the masses by tracking the dynamics of search engine optimization. Almost one-third article at Historical India appears in the top 5 searches in various engines. It also aims to serve as a platform for historical deliberation beyond the digital space. Snakes in the Ganga is the most recent intervention of Rajiv ji. It is a brilliant exposition of the threats that Bharatiya civilization today contends with. Not only has it brought to the light the intellectual foundation and modus operandi of the US-inspired work culture, but has also called out the sinister international nexus of academic institutions. We are sure that the discussions that follow shall provide us all with profound insight, a motivation to go through the work and to equip ourselves with intellectual and organizational tool to face these new challenges. We salute the Supreme who is in the light in the lamp that brings auspiciousness, prosperity, good health, the abundance of wealth and destruction of intellect's enemy. The ritual of lamp lighting is a symbol of positivity and optimism, and therefore sacred before beginning any event. In light of that, we would now like to invite our guest, Rajiv Malhotra sir, author and public intellect on civilizational studies, Mr. Rahul Shivshankar sir, editor-in-chief, Times Now, Professor Alka Chawla ma'am, professor in charge, Campus Law Center, Professor Abanti Bhattacharya ma'am, Department of East Asian Studies, University of Delhi, who is also the mentor of Bharat Book Club, and Dr. Vikas Verma sir, Head of Department History, Ramjas College, Delhi University, who is also the mentor of Historical India, on the stage for Deep Prajwalan.
दीप ज्योतिः परम ज्योतिः दीप ज्योतिर्जनार्दन दीपो हरतु मे पापं दीप ज्योतिर्नमोस्तुते शुभं करोतु कल्याणं आरोग्यं सुख संपदा द्वैष बुद्धि विनाशाय आत्मज्योतिः नमोस्तुते आत्मज्योतिः प्रदीप्ताय ब्रह्मज्योतिः नमोस्तुते ब्रह्मज्योतिः प्रदीप्ताय गुरुज्योतिः नमोस्तुते.
Now I request the guests to be kindly seated on the stage with all the dignitaries, Sir Rajiv Malhotra, Rahul Shivshankar sir, and with all the dignitaries kindly be seated. And with that, now the most awaited moment has arrived, the launch of the magnificent piece of work by Rajiv Malhotra sir, Snakes in the Ganga, Breaking India 2.0, a book for which a founding faculty fellow at the University of Austin has said that once in a generation, a book comes along that has the possibility of changing the course of the civilization. I request Rajiv Malhotra sir and our dignitaries to unwrap the most awaited book of our time. Now, I would request Rajiv Malhotra sir to please gift a copy of his book to the Bharat Book Club Library on behalf of the Blue Ink Publications, and I request the historical mentor, Professor Vikas Verma sir, to receive the book on behalf of the Bharat Book Club. Now, I would request Professor Alka Chawla ma'am, Professor in charge of the Campus Law Center, to please deliver the welcome address.
Good afternoon, everyone. Well, I never thought I'll get so emotional while giving a welcome address because, honestly speaking, I've not read the book. But I've seen a lot of videos and his, interviews with people, and so with Rahul. So before I begin my welcome address, I thought I must tell you this because while I was climbing up, I suddenly felt like so because I talked to him in person just before coming for this welcome address. All right, a very good afternoon to all of you and a very, very warm welcome to Mr. Rajiv Malhotra, author of the book Snakes in Ganga, Breaking India 2. You know, the title is so interesting. We'll come to the title later. Warm welcome to Mr. Rahul Shivshankar, Editor-in-Chief, Times Now, Professor Abanti Bhattacharya, Dr. Vikas Verma, Dr. Anju Tikku, Professor in charge, Law Center 1, Professor Gunjan Gupta, all our dear faculty members here, and dear students, ladies and gentlemen. We at Campus Law Center, we are overwhelmed to organize this panel discussion in collaboration with Bharat Book House. We all know that Campus Law Center is a premier institution which has produced great luminaries, judges of the Supreme Court. At the moment, I think there are 6 judges in the sitting High Court, which are 6 from Campus Law Center, which is a huge number. The Chief Justice and the Law Minister are from Campus Law Center. So we've also produced great political leaders, bureaucrats, authors, and so on and so forth. I cannot give you the entire list. It'll take days. We are engaged in initiatives, various initiatives and collaborations with an ultimate goal of holistic development of its students. So the question is, why are we here? Bharat Book House, one can understand. Historians, one can understand. But why Campus Law Center? Why are we all gathered here? Why is it important for us to discuss about a book? I wouldn't call it the book. Just one book, and we are all here to discuss. What is in it that makes it so significant, so relevant? A dozen years ago, Rajiv Malhotra ji wrote, published that book, which is Breaking India. I would call it 1.0, and now we have Breaking India 2.0. This is a book which had, in fact, created a revolution amongst the socio-legal thinkers, the political thinkers. It's basically because in his very unique and magnificent way, he has discussed various points which I'm not going to deal with, but one of them was the caste system, which I think he will surely touch upon, both of them while the panel discussion is on. The title, I was thinking of why this title, Snakes in Ganga. And I found out because I kept on thinking, what could it be? And actually, whatever I thought was what I found from the videos that I saw, sir, that it's actually a metaphor of hidden dangers. Ganga, whenever we say, we think that it's a pure, it's a pious, it's a sacred river. So one holy dip in it, डुबकी जिसको बोलते हैं, एक डुबकी मारने से लगता है there's rejuvenation of life which is going to come. So when we talk about this rejuvenation of life, there has to be security, there has to be safety, there has to be peace around. One doesn't have to think about anything, any kind of danger which is working around you. And least that we expect is any kind of poison, venom, snakes. And here he's written about snakes in Ganga. So there has to be something. What are these snakes? If I'm not wrong, sir, I think they depict the uncomfortable truths concerning India's vulnerabilities. We would like to hear about them from the author himself. So I will not go to the vulnerabilities myself. But there are certain which are infiltrating India. I was also reading about him and I found, and while talking to him just before coming to this audience, sir, it's something so great. I am inspired. Before this, I was not, but today I am actually inspired after sitting with you for some time. I'll tell you why. You know, he's a researcher, he's a public intellectual, this we all know, on civilizational studies, world religion, and cross culture countries and encounters. He has an amazing life journey. He was trained initially as a physicist, then as a computer scientist, specializing in artificial intelligence, coming to real intelligence now, moving from artificial to the real intelligence, an entrepreneur who founded and ran several IT companies. And while talking, he told me, you know, the kind of certain innovations that he had made. And they were running into some 50, 60 patents, but he decided not to patent them. So one reason was good, that there is always, you know, we keep knowing about theft taking place, but intellectual theft is something which we are not talking about, and which is a very sad thing which is happening a number of times in today's world. So while keeping secrets, I think one can still work better on it rather than people polluting it with their own ideas. But since early 1990s, as the founder of his non-profit Infinity Foundation, he has been researching on civilizations from historical, social, and mind sciences. And he's authored several best-selling books. With him is in conversation Rahul Shivshankar ji. Who doesn't know him? Every day we see him on TV. We offered him a cup of tea and coffee. He said, no, I don't take tea, coffee. And I was wondering, how can that roaring voice on national TV without tea? Bhartiya hone ke naate chai peena to banta hai. But that is something which he doesn't take. And he said, it's my conviction which makes me speak. So I think a big applaud for both of them. I'll just take one more minute. Sir, in Gita it is said, do your dharma. No matter who or how many people go against you. And I'm so happy you're here amongst the young generation here. And I think we as teachers, it is our duty to give a holistic development to these students. But this holistic development has to mean a few things. You know, many times it happens that you just give your viewpoint, you just give your opinion. And many people may think that snakes in the Ganga is just his viewpoint. No, it is not. Please pick up the book. It's running into, I think, 800 pages, more than 800 pages. And if you look at the footnotes, hundreds and thousands of them, which means that he has done deep research into the work. And this is the message which I would like to give as a teacher, stealing his copyright, that you must work, you must research, go deep into the subject, and then give your, what we say, your opinions about something. Because if that opinion is well researched, it would be well taken by people. Only then can you talk about historical, social perspectives if you have read it. Sir, another good thing that you are doing for our students is that you are teaching them that if you have done your homework well, you should also have the courage, you should have the boldness to bring it before people and challenge those who are talking against you and tell them, come, let's have a dialogue. And I bet nobody has still come to you for a dialogue. Because sometimes when you're so well researched, when you've gone deep into the topic, the others are scared, under fear of talking to you because they know that they're going to lose the battle. It is not the battle that we are talking about. It is the kind of research that he has done. And another thing that you have taught our young generation is the spirit of nationalism. I think this is something which we all must learn, just not because we are an Indian. It is not that just. We are Indians. We should look at the history. We should read at such books and go further research and question him. And I'm sure, Rahulji, today you will be asking less questions. And we'll have this younger generation who will be having lots and lots of questions to be asked from the author. Thank you so much. I welcome you all to this, I think, a great moment for all of us to have Rajiv ji here amongst us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I would now invite Rajiv Malhotra sir and Vijay Vishwanathan ma'am for the book reading session. Vishwanathan ma'am has joined us online from United States. Over to you, sir.
Namaste. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been here many times. My friend here has invited me alone, I think about 8 or 9 times. And I'm also a product of Delhi University. I did my physics honors from St. Stephen's College from 68 to 71. And what a delight to have Rahul. Quiz me, grill me, I hope you do that. And most of all, my co-author Vijaya is online, and she's woken up at 4 o'clock in the morning in New Jersey just to be part of this. And when you hear her speak, you will know why this book is going to go places. Because she has the ability to just get it out in a very powerful way. I want to discuss in general what this book is about, but first of all I want to tell you, don't be scared by the thick size. You don't need to read it cover to cover. The book is not meant to be read cover to cover except for somebody who's writing a dissertation. You can read any chapter by itself. So you read the introduction, you get the whole overview of the whole thesis. Every chapter starts with overview. There's a 1-page overview section which gives you the highlights of that chapter. So there are 22 chapters and each with a 1-page overview or 1.5-page overview. So if you read the introduction and you read the overviews, then in 70-80 pages you will have understood what the book is saying. The rest of the book, the details, are to prove the thesis. We make a claim, and then in the rest of a particular chapter, we prove it with quotations, with references, with citations, with arguments. But if you just want to know what is our thesis, you don't need to read the whole book. And then you can go to any page, any chapter separately and read it. You don't have to read them in sequence, and you don't have to read all of them. So if you want to know, for example, what is the attack against IITs by Harvard University, which is a very serious attack, then you read chapter 4. We explain to you what they are saying and our response. And that's the only chapter you need to read. Or if you want to read what does Ajay Piramal Center at Harvard, what is it doing and how is it an issue for us, then there's a chapter for that. Or what is the Lakshmi Mittal and Family South Asia Institute at Harvard doing? There's a separate chapter for that. Or what is happening at Ashoka University, which concerns us because they're importing Harvard ideas which are not consistent with our dharmic ideas and redistributing them, then there's a separate chapter for that. So the separate chapters cover separate things. It's written with that in mind. So don't let the size scare you. The overall thesis is based on 30 years of engagement I've had, particularly with the liberal arts establishment in the United States, the Ivy Leagues. I live in Princeton, right near Princeton University. I've engaged them. I've engaged University of Chicago, Columbia University, Harvard University, etc. My foundation gave millions of dollars of grants to various universities in order to promote Indian thought. And I was very much an active person in engaging them. And I found that rather than promoting Indian thought, they were doing what I called caste, cows and curry. That was their idea of India, kind of a mythic India, a very stereotype India, and India the land of social abuse and things of that sort. So I started engaging them, and I read every single dissertation that would come out of these places. While being a donor, in those days there was no other donor. There was no Mahindra or Mittal or Piramal or Tatas, and these people had not arrived. and we were the ones who were launching the whole idea of Indian donors trying to promote India studies in these universities. And it was very difficult to get our point of view across because we know what Oxford did during the British Empire, and it seems that the empire shifted across the Atlantic, and now Harvard was taking that kind of a role, playing the leading player in the area of discourse development, bringing scholars of a certain kind, spinning a certain idea, and then sending it out. And, you know, this has to be taken on. At some point in time, it has to be taken on. So after funding them for many years, funding the Indology Roundtable Conference for several years in a row, funding visiting professors at Harvard for multiple years, and it costed a lot of money. I withdrew from funding because I felt that this is like feeding the crocodiles. You're feeding the crocodiles will not become like a friendly dog and wag his tail and try to be a nice dog to you. No matter how much you feed, the guy is going to eat your hand when he can. So you're just feeding something that is not going to change. So it's a bad idea. The right thing to do is we need to create Vedic liberal arts in India and be able to respond. And so that's how I transferred my posture. It wasn't like I suddenly came up with all these ideas to criticize them one day. I've been an insider. I have a history of funding them, being in rooms like this, being in panel discussions, engaging those people as a donor, celebrated, appreciated, with a lot of thank you letters and all of that stuff. I've been there, and I decided to quit. And after I quit playing that role, there was a vacuum, and then they decided to go after Mumbai-based billionaires and said, okay, now we'll get our money from there. And that's the game that started, and that's what I'm critiquing in some ways. So I have a background in what I'm talking about. Many of the senior people I've engaged, I've known them for a very long time. The discourse starts in the United States for American problems of race. And I explained that in chapter 1. And then these theories, which are applicable to the United States, and I have sympathy for these theories when applied to the United States. But these theories then get mapped onto India. The main mapping is that caste is a form of racism. Now we know there are caste problems. I'm not defending. I'm saying there are caste problems. They can be solved, and they are being solved, and more needs to be done. But it is not the same thing as American racism. There is no history of that kind. It is not like Dalits were brought from Africa or some other place and made into slaves. It's not like that. They're part of our family. And there is abuse, and there is distortion, and there is oppression. It needs to be solved. But it is not the same thing as the American racism. And if you have one disease, you cannot cure it with the medicine of another disease. The disease is there and you need to cure it, but you cannot say it's the same as the other disease. They are different. So these issues are different. The issues of bias are different. Also, this idea that Dalits are the blacks of India and the non-Dalits are the whites of India. And India is basically like the American racism, where the whites are oppressing and suppressing the blacks. This is kind of how the whole theory is. And this has been exported to Indian thought, Indian studies all over the world now from Harvard. So this is the problem I see. It is not that everything about Harvard is bad. Harvard is a wonderful university for physics, for chemistry. They've got Nobel Prizes for biology, for medicine, for engineering. In those STEM education fields, it's fantastic. In economics, it's fantastic. So there are a lot of schools in Harvard that are wonderful. But when it comes to the study of India, when it comes to social justice, when it comes to issues of human rights, when it comes to gender studies, the studies of grievances, all kinds of people who got grievances against the establishment, when it comes to the study of those and the way they mapped India as a land of oppressed people, it's a nation of oppressed people, nation of victims. And it's a question of identifying this victim, that victim, organizing them, making them fight this guy, that guy, and dismantling Hindutva, dismantling the nation state, dismantling Indian government, dismantling the Vedic system, dismantling Indian constitution, dismantling India in every sense, dismantling families. Dismantling families is part of the agenda. So when it goes so bad, then you have to stand up and say something. No, now it may be said, why are you taking them on? And isn't it unreasonable that you are critical of them? But wait a second. They are so powerful. It's the David and Goliath syndrome. They are so powerful. They are so hegemonic. They own the journals, the conferences. They train all the famous journalists who go and write in Washington Post and New York Times and Wall Street Journal and BBC and all of that. They populate the think tanks where all kinds of things happen. They are developing the policies for Niti Aayog. They're consultants, people they've trained who go into McKinsey and who go into places like Deloitte and Touche and PricewaterhouseCoopers and Ernst & Young and all of these famous international American consulting companies. They populate these, and then these people are writing all the policies. Your HR policy, your policy on environment, your policy on technology is all written by these foreign consultants. So there is a kind of a new colonization. The previous Breaking India 1.0 talked about foreign nexuses invading through the grassroots, through the bottom, either conversions in poor villages, uneducated poor villages, or Dravidianism. It was not elite, not top level. But now Breaking India 2.0 is different because now they're coming to elite places. They're coming to places like Ashoka, where you pay 10 to 12 lakhs a year to send your kids. These are from rich families. And people who send their kids to play in Ivy Leagues in the United States, it costs $70,000 a year. So these are pretty rich people. So the intellectual brainwashing is now not at the grassroots level. That's going on already, which was started long ago. That's continuing. But this is at a new level, at the top. So in that sense, it's very different from the previous Breaking India, and hence it requires a different study. Now, one of the cornerstones of this thing known as critical race theory, which is popularly called wokeism, the foundation is that all the old structures of knowledge production have produced a hegemonic discourse. Because of the people involved, elitist people in charge, they've produced a hegemonic discourse. And therefore, there needs to be a counter-hegemony. So I'm taking their theory, applying it back to them. And I'm saying that the Indology or the study of India is now being controlled by these very people. Even the folks in India who are either studying under a professor who came from there, many of the elite colleges here are very proud. They're quoting those sources. They're not quoting the adhikaris of our civilization. They're quoting places in the West, and Harvard being the top of the whole pyramid. So if that is the structure of knowledge production, that is the hegemonic discourse. So according to critical race theory itself, we are supposed to create a counter-hegemony. And so that's what I'm trying to do. So why is that considered unfair criticism when you are taking on the mightiest people who have prevented discourse from the other side? It's called cancel culture. I have been cancelled for 25, 30 years. If I go and say I want to speak on the India Forum, so many times Indian students have proposed my name in the annual India conference, and it gets killed at the top because they say, no, we don't want these kind of people. And I'm not the only one cancelled. There are lots of people cancelled. You can look at the list of who's who that are being brought in all the time and felicitated and given a lot of space. And then the Harvard Thappa makes them very credible and legitimate. And then they come here and they have a lot of authority. Okay. And then you can see who has never been invited. I'll give you an example. They have a lot of discussions recently on the economics of caste. And they've brought in certain people. But they've never brought in, for instance, R. Vaidyanathan of Indian Institute of Management in Bangalore, who has spent decades studying with statistics on different castes and what is the economic situation of those castes, what is good, what is not good, how the jatis use their cohesiveness and their collective identity to do bargains and trades and share financial resources with each other. A lot of brilliant pieces of work. Never once invited, never once referenced. It's almost like he's cancelled. He's not allowed to be there. You will find a lot of Indian thinkers of that kind have been totally cancelled. So you have, in the name of free speech and liberalism, you have the world's most powerful university calling itself the Vishwa Guru, because Indians have thought this is the Vishwa Guru, with the arrogance of power. So here I am as a one man, and I don't have I'm not part of the institution of government here. I'm not part of the institution of any organized media. I'm not part of any think tank. I'm not part of any sort of university situation where I have a forum. I'm just one man as a free thinker challenging them. So what is wrong with that? Isn't that the true spirit of free thinking and liberalism, that one person should be able to take on the mightiest people, invite them in a polite, diplomatic, dignified way, in a respectful way, for a dialogue, a discourse, and a debate? And that's all I have done for 25, 30 years, but they've decided to cancel because they cannot stand the logic, the arguments, the data that we keep providing in our books. So therefore, we go and write a book for the public, so that you, the public, are better informed. So that you, the public, it's your future. I'm 72 years old. It's not my future. It's your future at stake. So you have to know these things so that you don't get fooled. And you have to be able to stand up and say, why is the government following blindly the advice of foreign policymakers who have come from somewhere else, who got their own agendas? Why are the industrialists funding all this? Why is the media not exposing this? Why didn't the IITs respond when their institution was attacked? I'm responding. I'm not even an IITian. But you have very rich IIT people in very high places. Why aren't they responding? And why haven't the professors of IIT responded? I mean, the number of issues I'm raising are quite a lot, and quite a lot of provocations. So the book requires serious reading, but it's not necessarily going to take you a lot of time. It's easy. The language, we made sure there are diagrams and pick images and sort of to help you out. It is very large amount of information organized in a simple way. A large amount of information organized so that it's easy for you to understand what exactly is going on, how to respond. If you want to be well informed, to be in the dialogue, in the conversations, in the debates, you want to talk back, you want to be very intelligent, the book we've done is the best we can think of to educate our people so they can stand up and speak with confidence. So when you speak on a certain subject matter, you know what to say, what the other guy is thinking, how to figure out what he's thinking, where is he coming from, and how we can respond. And if you need data, you go back to the book and you look up, there is data, there is references, quotes, you can look that up. So that's the project. It's been a long piece of work done. Many of these are things that had been written before. I've been writing for a long time, and they have to be compiled, cleaned up, verified, and now put together in a book. And this is how I'm writing many books. Things that much of my written work has never been published. I would say 80-90%. I keep writing every morning, and then one day when there's enough written on a certain topic, I clean it up and try to get it out and publish it. So that's how this book is also something that has been churning for a very long time. I would like to stop and request Vijaya to jump in and give her unique perspective, which is very important, and then we'll take it from there and have questions and answers. Thank you very much.
Namaste, everybody. I'm just going to mute myself because I can hear myself talk. Sorry. Okay. Rajiv ji gave you an overview of how this book can be a support for a lot of you. But I want to start off by saying that our generation has let you down as youngsters. At home, you have not got a good grounding because our generation hasn't been good custodians of what was passed on to us, and we haven't passed it on to you. And outside, we have not bothered to build institutions that give you a good sense of identity, a good sense of the Indic civilizational ethos. So here you are, young, confused, and looking for direction. And none of us need decades. So first and foremost, I'd like to apologize to you all as youngsters uh, that we've left you high and dry. But this book is a humble attempt to give you that support, to give you the ideas and frameworks to think about what is being put on to you. You often hear very innocuous sounding terms like social justice, human rights, LGBTQ rights, upliftment of the marginalized, which are all very good initiatives that we should all support. But Marxism is very predatory, and guess what? You are the prey. Because the task of indoctrinating young minds is what Marxism looks for. And in its new form, the critical race theory, what it seeks to do is to dismantle society using you as their tool. Now, young people are being indoctrinated in large numbers and are charged with doing the dirty job of breaking up society. Know it. The easy targets are those among you that have no grounding and no sense of self. So the youngsters with no sense of identity fall prey very easily. Now, let's take the example of the LGBTQ agenda of critical race theory. The Marxists stripping your identity at the very core, and the whole gender ideology is one such tool that they use to confuse youth. They glorify the adoption of synthetic identities under the noble cause of gender affirmation. We are not denying that a very few people in society have genuine issues of gender dysphoria, and we empathize with them, we want to support them. But this kind of mass social engineering is what critical race theorists have in their agenda. Now, what are they doing? They are promoting body mutilating surgeries in teens that are not reversible, like 16-year-olds in America, young women have bilateral mastectomies. These are things that are not reversible. Teenage years are hard for everyone, and you are vulnerable. And the Marxists use this as an opportunity to confuse you and strip you of your identity and make you an activist. Puberty blockers are essentially used for chemical castration of violent criminals, and these are promoted for gender affirmation. So they are widely giving youngsters, first confusing youngsters on their gender, and then promoting puberty blockers as a way to deal with gender affirmation. They're also promoting pornography in youngsters. There are lots of psychological issues when you engage in pornography, and it's very well known and documented. They're also promoting and advocating deviant sexual behavior in youngsters. They want to destroy childhood innocence by destigmatizing pedophilia. So the agenda is very, very clear that they want to confuse you, they want to sexualize you, and they want you to be their foot soldiers to dismantle society. Now, this whole idea of saying that gender is a social construct and nothing to do with biology is another tool that they have used. They force people to use personal pronouns, and this is also a huge problem because they normalize that gender has nothing to do with biological sex. Now, if you go to any tribal elder in your community or close by and ask them, what is gender and what is biological sex, and tell them that this is a social construct, they would laugh at you. But of course, the Marxists will not go to the most marginalized people and ask them these questions, because there is tribal wisdom, and most people would tell you that gender and biological sex are intimately related and connected. Now, they use these ideas to train youngsters like you. And so very soon we all will be using personal pronouns as if this is something that is normal. The idea is to develop something called critical consciousness in you, which is the ability to see the entire society and your world in terms of power systems. Thus, you will end up seeing oppression everywhere. You will see oppressors and oppressed everywhere in the world. Now, the work scholarship has no rationality, is not proven, and yet it has become so pervasive and prevalent. So, what can we do? So these ideas actually, before I get into what we can do, one should also realize that these ideas actually do the most disservice to the marginalized, like the Dalits, because it says that the Dalits are not good enough. It's a condescension and a patronizing attitude towards people who are marginalized by telling them that we want equal outcome and you guys can't get it in this system the way it's set up. So we will do away with entrance examinations, for instance, because they think that the Dalits cannot handle it. So you can't look at society in a way that it disempowers the marginalized. And that's exactly what these people are doing. So for true Dalit empowerment, we should ensure that they have access, that they have support, and they can play the game that we all play in the spirit of competition and merit. But these guys do not want Dalits to do well, because as long as they are kept marginalized, they can be controlled. So this is the opposite of Dalit empowerment. So getting back to what can you do? I would say you should be grounded. What does grounding mean? I think you should take pride in your traditional practices that root you. Make your identity strong, which means be proud of your bhasha. Make sure you speak in your language. Your Kula Devata worship, your Ishta Devata worship, your specific utsavas and festivals that are specific to your community. You should celebrate those. The traditional foods of your community, you should keep those practices alive. The methods of cooking, modes of worship, ways of dressing, this will all make your identity really strong and make you proud of who you are. You should strengthen your links with your villages. All this instills a sense of pride and a strong sense of identity that is truly and uniquely yours. And this will ensure that no matter what Marxist theories you confront, that you are solidly grounded. Then other thing to do would be to reject things like pronouns and some of the demands of Marxist activists. You should not let anybody put you on a guilt trip that as if you're doing something wrong, because you're not. So succumbing to bullying of the leftists is a way that they get you into their fold. The third thing is to use common sense. The whole idea of gender is a social construct. It can be easily refuted by just using common sense. The idea that equal outcomes are somehow possible also can be refuted using common sense. So barring all else, use common sense to guide you and not be carried away by any of these Marxist ideologies. So with that, I will close and we can open up for questions later. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Rajiv sir and Vijaya ma'am. Now I would request Mr. Rahul Shivshankar sir to commence with conversations with Rajiv Malhotra sir, followed by a question-answer session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you for being here, all of you. This is a pleasant surprise to see so many young people that we actually want to reach out to. Big books these days overwhelm the young. So don't be overwhelmed by the size of this book. Every page is worth reading, and unlike in his modest way, Mr. Malhotra says you don't need to read it from cover to cover. I actually have, and found it very enriching, and I'm sure all of you will. And it is an eye-opening book because it will help you locate some of the conversations we are having with such energy in the country. Now, Mr. Malhotra, thank you very much for speaking to me today, for making the time. It's a pleasure to be speaking to someone who at last is willing to submit their thesis for scrutiny, if I may put it like that. So it's always a sign that someone has done their research, they're sure about their facts, and they have the robustness intellectually to defend their thesis. And this is a very heavy thesis which you have presented, and I'm sure is going to spark a huge conversation. So without much ado, let me begin. Much of the concern you voiced in the book was in a way apparent just a few days ago when the Wall Street Journal carried a full-page advertisement calling for the imposition of sanctions against certain Indians, 11 Indians, through the Magnitsky Act. This created a huge controversy because there were 11 names that were taken. But what we are now being told, according to government sources and others who were part of the group that actually funded this particular advertisement, was that the person behind, or one of the intellectual architects of this campaign, was the CEO of Devas Ramachandran Vishwanathan, who is a fugitive at large. So this ad was inspired by a fugitive in the WSJ. How do you read this? And who do you believe are the forces at work here, and what is their agenda?
Thank you very much. So, as we've mentioned in this book, there are systems in place that are against the sovereignty of India and its civilization, and these people come from various points of view. They're not all the same point of view. Some are Indians who feel that they've been cheated, or they have grievances against the country and they haven't gotten justice. To be fair to them, they feel they haven't gotten justice, and they're going to an international authority. Much like some Indian Rajas would go to the East India Company for help because they would feel that maybe this guy will give me justice. Now, you can argue that perhaps it's a good thing to do. I've talked to many of them and they say, look, in India I didn't get justice, so I've gone to Harvard. And I say to them that maybe if you look at the track record of Harvard, whether they intervene in Afghanistan or Iraq or Vietnam in the name of bringing human rights and democracy, they destroying whatever existed there, the structures that existed there, in the name of creating better new structures. The new structures never happened. The old structures got destroyed. They left anarchy and a whole lot of nonsense and mess. So if you look at the track record, they haven't really succeeded in doing this anywhere else. Why would we trust them and bring them here? How do you know that they won't make it even worse for you? And the second point is that while there is injustice in India, social injustice in India, the US, people like Harvard and others, have not been able to repair the social justice in their own country. I mean, how can they export solutions to us? So, you know, for people to put out issues against Indians, you can find such issues 10 times over against, you know, Americans themselves, and they should be basically sorting their own thing out. I see the following. I see that Wall Street Journal New York Times, Washington Post, all these places, think tanks, the US Congress, Harvard, etc., are like a giant foil, and the people who feel injustice has been done, who have grievances, want to reach out and hit out and get something from them, because they feel that if I am enough of a victim, if I play the role of victim, they'll admit me, and so maybe they'll help me. So I see that that's what's going on. It's a combination of people who are victims, who feel that their own country didn't help them enough, and maybe somebody is a fugitive or somebody is activist in some other sense. There are a lot of political groups in India that go to Harvard. Sugata Bose is based there, and he was an MP in Mamata Banerjee's party. So he is based, he's a very senior professor there. He brings all these kind of people there. Rahul Gandhi is interviewed, and he gives a lot of talk against the Indian government, but he'd rather go there and do it. You see, I have no problem with all of this discussion happening within India. It should happen. But when you go to a foreign authority, then you are bringing in their agenda. You shouldn't think that they are some pure people who are, out there without any agenda of their own, and they're out there to generously help you. They've never done that in any other country that they intervene. So that's my perspective on why this is going on. And I would blame Indians also. I don't think that all Indians are very nice and easy and good people, and all Americans are bad people and they're doing this to us. I don't believe in that. The United States has many segments, many different kinds of people, and you will find from the one extreme to the other extreme, like in India, you'll find many kinds of people. So basically, it's the Indians who have found allies in America, certain groups, to help them out. And so all sorts of things that are happening in India are a product of this sort of collaboration between grieved Indians who are victims and Americans who have this liberal idea that we're going to civilize the world, we're going to save humanity, even though they haven't saved their own people. So I see it that way.
It's interesting because how would you explain then the difference between what we're seeing now and what's happened in the past? Remember that India was on the wrong side of the Western, perhaps intellectual tradition. In the 50s and 60s and 70s, we were seen as being aligned to the Soviet bloc. And of course, there were people who were funding and collaborators here in India who were open to funds from the West to try and change the dominant narrative in the country. So how does that differ from the past? What's happening now?
So in the past, they didn't want India to slip too much into the Soviet camp. So that's the interference you're talking about. The CIA was here. In fact, one of the leaders who understood what I'm talking about better than anyone else was Indira Gandhi. I have to say that. Indira Gandhi took on Richard Nixon. She was very concerned about the CIA. She banned Ford Foundation. She banned Ford Foundation. She did a lot of things that were very nationalistic. So you can't say that this is some kind of a Hindutva project, because she's nothing to do with Hindutva. She was just a very patriotic Indian who didn't like all this kind of nonsense happening. And she was very angry at Henry Kissinger, and she was angry at Nixon. All that stuff is well known. Now, in the present time, the United States has appreciated that India is a useful ally. I would use the word useful. It's not ally per se, like in the sense of England or Israel, but a useful ally. Useful in the sense that we can be a counter to China, we can be a counter to the expansion of Islam. Both of those are the big problems that the United States faces. But it's not India for sake of India. Indians somehow get mesmerized, get into a romantic thing that, maybe the Russians love us, or maybe the Americans love us. The fact is that nobody loves us, they love themselves, and they love us if it's useful for that. We have to really stand on our own the way China has done. And so United States interventions in India have changed from the earlier version, which was to subvert the Soviet influence, to a new version, which is partly to open the policies of the economy and bring in a floodgate of a whole lot of American technology and also American policies. Both technologies going at the elite level, corporate, and policies are going at the government level, also at the top. And educating a huge generation of people, young Indians, either directly from America or indirectly through professors who've been trained in America. So that's where the difference is. And the end game for the United States is to make India a good, thriving economy, a capitalist economy up to a point, but not another China. You see, a billion plus Chinese is bad enough competition. Having another billion plus economy also like that would be just devastating. So they don't want India to fall apart, because that would be like another Middle East kind of a thing, 100 times bigger. That would be very bad. If India fell apart, that would be bad for the Americans. And if India became another China the other way around, that would also be bad for the Americans. I often call it the mother-in-law syndrome, if I may be pardoned for that. Mother-in-law doesn't want that the couple fight and break up. That's not good for her. But she doesn't want that they come together so strong that they also defy her. So it's like if they are too much together. I'm glad you liked my humor, because in many places I go, they say, oh no, sexist and whatever.
You'll be cancelled.
Yeah.
You'll be cancelled.
But I see that you can take humor also. So if they are too strong, that's a threat. But if they fall apart, there's no family left, that's also pretty bad. So this is the American mother-in-law syndrome. If India were to fall apart, it's bad for America. They don't want it. And if India were to be too much together, so that would be another China. They don't want that either. They don't want India to fall apart like the Middle East crisis, all these things happening and wars inside. And they don't want India to become another China, which is too strong, too together. So this is the dance of America between these two extremes. And this is one thing you have to keep in mind when you're trying to read them.
Okay, now in your book, and it's very interesting, you write one of the ways that this is being done, and let me quote you, is that seeds of social discord are being planted. Now let me quote you here. Mr. Malhotra and co-author Ms. Vishwanathan write, what is essential to explain is the way African Americans and Dalits are being brought together for this purpose, so that the latest shockwaves of racism in American society can be transported to India, unquote. In other words, what you're saying is that a parallel is being drawn between the black experience, the subversion of a particular cadre of society, and here in India with Dalits. And you talk in detail about how this is being done. My question is, if a group believes it has a historical grievance of being ill-treated, it does place its grievance in certain global context to create awareness. Now, is that what you believe is happening here, or is there something more insidious?
I think that's what's happening here. There are grievances. I sympathize with them. In fact, I've tried to reach out to these Harvard people. I've written to Suraj Yengde, their poster boy, for this Afro-Dalit movement. He's changed his hair to an afro, and he said, I'm a black, and it's kind of symbolically, brotherhood with the blacks. We heard of Bobby Jindal, who was trying to be white, and now we have another kind of person who's trying to be black. I mean, there is opportunism both ways. So I've tried to reach out to him a few times saying, I'm actually critiquing your book, Suraj Yengde. He's a young man, very charismatic, very powerful speaker, and they really like this kind of guy at Harvard. He's an Indian Dalit. And I've said, can we sit down and talk about how all the issues you're raising can be addressed in the Indian context? You don't need Harvard, and how Harvard is using you. They're using you because you're a useful person for doing all this, and they're not going to, at the end of the day, help you. You'll just make a lot of noise and help them out. And maybe the creamy layer, people like you, will enjoy the good life at Harvard, but your people in India are not going to get any benefit out of it. So I've tried, but not been able to get any response, any interest on their part. So I think this is correct. The people like that from India. There are Kashmir separatists, by the way. There are Khalistanis. So it's not just the Dalits. There are all kinds of people here who land up there. When they have these South Asian conferences, they feature all kind of things. They talk about, Indian army. I mean, that is the place you go and express your complaints against India, and you get a very good hearing. And the counter view, they have never invited. Now, if there is a panel on army atrocities in Kashmir, then the right thing would have been to bring an army person also on the panel to give a response. If there is a panel discussion where Suraj Jengde says that Brahmins are criminal tribe, a criminal caste, criminal, he keeps using it many times, okay? And he says things like family should be dismantled because family is a Brahmanical conspiracy to transmit oppressiveness into the next generation. When he makes these extreme cases, they should bring in people who are experts from the opposing point of view, and I would respect Harvard for doing that. But those people are cancelled. So this one-sidedness of Harvard is troubling.
So let me ask you this, because you have submitted a response through your book, and the chapter is called A Response History of Indian Social Organization, where you break down or critique his thesis and say that it has deficiencies. Can you explain for our audience that is watching, what are the critical differences that you believe haven't been factored in when making this sort of link between the blacks in America and the Dalits here in India?
Well, when you talk about racism in America and they map it onto Indian Dalits, not only Dalits but also minorities, the equivalent would be if Indian minorities were people brought from another continent, brought by us from another continent as slaves and enslaved and oppressed. But neither Dalits were brought nor Muslims or Christians were forced and brought here as slaves. And that would be the equivalent thing. Also, when we talk about the oppressiveness that the whites had, the laws were very different. The laws of racism were very different. We haven't had that kind of the argument they give is that from Vedic times, Dalits have been slaves. This is the kind of argument being given. But the facts are very different. They were, prior to the Islamic period, if you look at it, there were Dalit, there were Shudra dynasties of kings. There were many professions where the lower caste were, what are today called lower caste, were quite prosperous. They were metallurgists, they were textile workers, they were agriculturists, and India was a very prosperous country. So when we look at the history of world economics, Cambridge University Press, history of world economics and world prosperity, until around 1800 or so, India and China were far richer than the Western world. So when you say India was so rich, as per Western documentation, their own British documentation, when India was so rich, it could not have been the case that 2 or 5% people who are Brahmins are controlling all the wealth. That was not the case. They are not even allowed to control the wealth. So it had to be the masses. And even Dharampal in the 1800s, he cites the British records that until the 1800s, the British themselves write that the average Indian is better fed, better clothed than his counterpart in England. So there was prosperity among the masses. And he also looks at the composition of students in a Pathshala, and he looks at what caste they came from. Majority of them were lower caste by today. So the level of education given to these people was there. It was vocational for agriculture purposes, for whatever the profession of that family was, they were educated for that, and they were doing well. So I don't believe that they were always consistently poor. That is not the case. That history doesn't bear that out. And nor is it that this was sanctioned, because if you really want to look at Varna, which is not the same as Jati and which is not the same as caste, Varna, in the Varna system, a Brahmin is not allowed to have wealth. Brahmin is not allowed to have wealth. So today's Brahmins are not being Brahmins. I mean, if the ones who have wealth are not being Brahmins. It is not the fault of the system. It is that they're in violation of the system. Because Brahmins who accumulate wealth, nor is a Brahmin allowed to have political power. That is a Kshatriya's job. So the separation of political power with Kshatriyas, and the Kshatriya is not allowed to have wealth. The Kshatriya is not allowed to become a billionaire. And nor can he become a Brahmin and become a super intellectual type. So the Brahmins controlled intellectual capital, the Kshatriya's political capital, and legal capital, and the Vaishya's economic capital. So it's a separation of capital, and also it is not by birth, because that's an old debate we've had. People have said it's by birth, but all throughout history, people have also said it's not by birth, and they've challenged it. So you've always had this back and forth going on with people from various origins and various births challenging and moving up and moving down. So Suraj Yengde has got this very fossilized, fixed, all those guys are bad, all these guys are good, all the Brahmins are oppressors. This is kind of too extreme.
And you mentioned that there is an attempt to therefore dismantle structures.
Yes.
As we know them. So let me just quickly read out a few things that Suraj Yengde just wrote a few days back in a newspaper, and just give you a little bit of a primer. The fact is, in your book, you write that the whole idea is to dismantle Hinduism, which is the original sinner, and then the political, perhaps, expression of it, Hindutva.
Yes.
So Mr. Yengde writes, given that the RSS has not actively tried to abolish caste from society, the hierarchical Varna structure is still sanctified by its cadre. The sworn Hindus do not challenge the atrocities against Dalits. When cases such as Hathras happen, the honesty of Dr. Bhagwat's words ring hollow. They are merely a side talk by the RSS trying to shadow BJP and reiterate that they're still the ones who call the shots, unquote. Now, Mr. Malhotra, one might disagree with Mr. Yengde, but can it be denied that this desire to unite Hindu society does not find resonance among some who believe there are Hindus who cannot overcome their prejudices against the scheduled castes, tribes, etc.? So, is Yengde's narrative divorced from reality?
So, first of all, I don't want to defend RSS because they should defend themselves.
Sure.
I mean, I have many friends who are in the RSS. I also disagree with some of them on certain matters. I also support them, and I feel they've done amazing work. But as far as defending their policy and their practice regarding caste, I think it's for them to do. But what I've heard them say is they are against the caste system. Today, they are against the caste system, and they know it weakens Hindu society. So for that reason, they want to get rid of those kind of biases. In fact, a lot of the caste Brahmin type people disagree with them on that very basis. So I don't think his facts are correct, but they have to defend that. Now, as far as is the society divided? Yes. Is there oppression? Yes. But that is true of every society. There is not a single civilization in the world today, even a homogeneous society like Japan, certainly not Russia, certainly not the Middle East, certainly not France, any European country, United States. There is no major country in the world which can say that there is no social hierarchy, that there is no social oppression. That is how it is. So one could say all societies, all civilizations, all religions have failed, all countries have failed, dismantle everything. Then what happens? What happens is you have anarchy, you have a vacuum of power, a vacuum of any system, and this is a recipe for irresponsible people to take over the vacuum. If India fell apart because all the structures were destroyed, it is not that there'll suddenly be Dalits running the country. It will be that there'll be mischief makers from our neighborhood coming and taking over, and the Dalits will also become slaves like anybody else. So if you destroy each other because somebody says to X that Y is your enemy, and they have oppressed you, you should overthrow them. It is not that X will start becoming the ruler, you'll destroy each other. The Marxist dialectic says that you have to, the thesis should be combated with an antithesis, and the two should have a war until both are destroyed so that a new order emerges. But in reality, Marxism has succeeded in creating destruction, never succeeded in creating a new order. They have no experience. They have never proposed. When you've destroyed the structures, how will you put up a new structure? They have no idea. Suraj Yengde, if you ask him, okay, let's say you're successful, you demolish all the structures of Indian society. Okay, now you have anarchy. So what's your plan next morning? If today you achieve that, next morning, what are you going to do? How are you going to run this society? See, this is the problem that Taliban had when they took over Afghanistan. They were very good at destroying and kicking out a structure. But when they had to suddenly run the country, they had no experience. They did not know what the hell to do. So now they're bringing everybody back saying, okay, now please help us run the country because we have no experience. So we may have a situation like that if the Suraj Jang days were successful.
This is interesting because in America, of course, there was this big conversation after the death of a black individual 2.5 years ago, where certain city councils said the time has come because of institutionalized racism to dismantle the police force.
Yes.
And they didn't quite have an answer of what would replace it to
Right.
bring about. But just to take off from where you left off, you talk about CRT or critical race theory. And you say it has its origins in Marxism. And Marxism hasn't been able to sort of supply the answers to a lot of the questions that you sort of proposed. How can cancel culture, which is an intrinsic part of CRT, it is one of the reasons why you claim CRT militates against classical liberalism. How big a concern is this on Indian campuses, Delhi University, for example, which are, at least on paper, meant to be upholding inclusivity and a diversity of views? A colleague of mine comes from JNU, where right now, if you belong to the other side, so to speak, ideologically, you are considered somebody who doesn't have an intellectual tradition backing your point of view. So how do you militate against, for example,
So I think
cancel culture?
cancel culture has existed in India. Cancel culture has existed in the United States. Basically, cancel culture says that those who disagree, rather than debating them, you should cancel them, throw them out. Now, this is totally contrary to the Indian ethos, which says do a purva paksha, which means you study the other respectfully, invite him for debate. Indians have a long history of argumentation, of engaging other people in a civil manner, non-violent, peaceful manner, purely intellectual manner, with rules of debate, You see, so on the one hand, they're saying this old civilization is no good, because everything should be dismantled. But on the other hand, this is a civilization that given the world many great things, including the idea that you should listen to other people and you should invite them for debate. So cancel culture is a new phenomenon in India. It's also a relatively new phenomenon on American campuses, because till recently, the US campuses, when they were liberal, they were truly liberal. Nowadays, when they say liberal, it's just a name, but they're not being truly liberal. Cancel culture is the most illiberal thing you can imagine. And the campuses have become ideological centers rather than free thinking centers. So rather than giving them opposing points of view so that the kids can decide for themselves, they should be comfortable in a world of complexity. They'll be living in a complex world, not a world where everybody's like them. And if they're going to live in a complex world, they should know that I have this view, somebody has that view, maybe he's partly right, maybe I'm partly right. That's complexity, and they should be encouraged. So people who disagree with Harvard, rather than being canceled, should be brought in. And I have no problem if I'm sitting there and there's all these other people against me and we are having an amicable debate. I have no problem if the whole class is against me or for me, or if there's two people for me. I have no problem with that. But I do have a problem that they don't even want to hear opposing points of view. So this cancel culture is a kind of it's self-defeating, because on the one hand you're against structures of oppression, but this cancel culture is itself a structure of oppression.
Of course, there's a startling bit of hypocrisy and contradiction there, but you're seeming to sort of link it with CRT. But India has had a large number of groups, for example, that have got irritated by movies or books that have been written, and intellectuals who have espoused points of views, even in the past. So, and you sort of say it's alien to Indian culture, but as we know, even under previous Congress governments, for example, there were hundreds of instances of where movies were not allowed to be screened, or
Yes.
books that were not released. So
Yes.
are we being a little superficial? Because cancel culture seems to have, there was an emergency, for God's sakes, in this country. That was the biggest.
That was the cancel culture.
Biggest,
Big one. Yes.
biggest example,
Yes.
and legitimized by the courts
Yes.
themselves. So how does that work?
So I think modern India has this problem. I do not consider that whether it's the BJP government or the Congress government, I don't absolve them of this problem. I think the British had this problem. The British would beat up all the, freedom fighters and all that stuff. They killed some of them. I mean, there's Jallianwala Bagh was a peaceful protest. I mean, come on, that's cancel culture. You shoot those guys. I mean, that's pretty bad. Yeah. So this has been going on, and this is a kind of a product of modernity. I think this is a product of modernity that I would say that more traditional societies. You look, I do a lot of work with Native Americans. Native Americans had a very free society. I mean, they would have a council of people, women, men, and they would all speak up, and nobody's got kicked out for some opposing point of view. Somehow in modernity, this started in the West and it spread everywhere. The intolerance and kind of an absoluteness of truth that some people control became kind of prevalent. And media, I mean, sorry because you're from media, but media kind of played this role because it's sort of the gatekeeper. And so as the gatekeeper of what will go out and what won't go out, it has also kind of homogenized the discourse in some ways. So I would, and we thought when social media came that this will change cancel culture because now anybody can do this. So for a while, social media was the antidote to cancel culture. But guess what happened? The algorithms are now running the social media. The algorithms are canceling. It's not Mark Zuckerberg deciding that you will be cancelled and you will be promoted. He doesn't have to do that. He's got these algorithms which can do the job of 100 million censoring human beings. And these algorithms have been fed certain criteria of truth. So now, for instance, if I say swastika, the algorithm says it's Nazism. And I cannot argue that in my tradition it doesn't mean that. My tradition has a different meaning. During COVID, many of my videos were cancelled because I was advocating Ayurvedic treatments, and over there the idea of Ayurvedic treatment was considered fake news. So it was cancelled. So who gets to decide? The only thing they tell you is violates community standards. So you violated community standards, there's no human being available. Finally, when you do get to a human being at YouTube or Facebook, they will say, sir, we don't know because this is algorithm. Algorithm is the devata that is cancelling people now.
Very interesting. You mentioned that even in your book. Now coming to Harvard, which you just talked about, which you believe is in many ways not just a symbol, but also a laboratory for unleashing these snakes in the Ganga. Now, this is a dramatic exposition when you link an institution, and we began by speaking about it. But in some ways, many people there might think that you are being hyperbolic and political, and if someone doesn't agree with you, you've sort of typecast them. You've called them a snake. There are other examples of people being called anti-nationals here in India. So how do you address those skeptics who will say, no, Rajiv Malhotra is very upset because we don't call him for a few debates now in Harvard, and he's therefore gone off on a tangent, and he's now saying that whatever we do is engineered towards the breakup of India and so on and so forth.
Okay, so Harvard has such a lot of extreme admonishment and attacks on India, they can hardly complain that I'm doing the same to them. I mean, the power they have is 1,000 times or many thousands of times more than mine. And if they are wielding this power and constantly able to come up with the standard discourse on Indian history, they have an idea on this Aryan theory, which is a very standard Harvard discourse. And you can go on arguing against it all you want. They just accuse you and blame you and call you names, but they're not going to invite such people. So it's not just a problem with me personally. It's a problem with the whole system that is a contrarian system. I disagreed when they cancelled Subramaniam Swamy. I mean, maybe I don't agree with him on all things, but they fired him from Harvard. He was an economics professor. His specialty was comparative study of Indian and Chinese economy. It had nothing to do with Islam. But he happened to make a statement in Mumbai where he said that Indian Muslims had Hindu ancestors. Now, okay, if you disagree with it, you can invite him and give him a contrarian view and debate him and see what the truth is. You don't cancel him from his economics class, which has nothing to do with it. And in many ways, it makes sense, because if they didn't have Hindu ancestors, then who were their ancestors? Their ancestors would have to be Arabs, which the Muslims don't want to. The Muslims don't want that to say that our ancestors were Arabs or Turks. They are Indians. So if they were Indians, then who were they? I mean, it's not a totally outrageous hypothesis. You can say maybe it's false, or maybe it's true, maybe it's sometimes true, in some cases it's false, but it's something subject for debate. You don't have to fire an economics professor. So I can give you many such examples where they have done this kind of thing. So it's hardly fair criticism that if I'm taking them on, it's something unreasonable, because people who have so much power and so much absolute power and who've used it in this kind of a way need to be criticized. And, I like to take on an issue, I like to take on the most powerful examples, not the marginal examples. Because if I'm to make my case on the hegemony of Western study of India, then taking on some minor college here, there's some minor professor, would not make my case. My case is made by taking on the most powerful. They have all the resources to come back and to debate me and to prove me wrong, and I'm challenging them to do that in a civil manner. And if they can do it, and if they can correct me, I'll correct myself. I'll put out a new edition and make all the corrections if they can find flaws. So this means I put myself up against a very high standard, and I like to do that, because if I'm right even part of my points, if I made 100 points, even if many of them are right, it's such a big deal. It would call for a major overhaul. And my belief is that I'm right pretty much all the time, or in all of these, because I've done my research. So I have raised the bar by criticizing the highest, most mighty people for a reason, and I challenge them to come back.
So let me ask you, because you write this, and I'm going to wind up in just the next 5 minutes so the floor can be opened up. You write, we discovered something far more worrisome. China's inroads into Harvard are also a gateway for it to penetrate India with influence and subversion, unquote. Tell us about how this is happening.
So there's two parts to this. China has infiltrated Harvard is a story in its own right. China's infiltration of Harvard has now become known to the FBI. They've gone and arrested a few professors. This has happened over a quarter century. And only in the last few years, when the US started becoming suspicious of China, they started looking at where are their footprints, where are their spies, and they realized that in many American think tanks, in some of the corporate R&D centers, and in places like Harvard, they've brought lots of people and they've infiltrated. Exactly the opposite of Indian billionaires who have given the money and let Harvard call the shots, and Harvard brainwash Indians. In the case of Chinese, the philanthropists have given money, but they've required Harvard to follow certain guidelines that China has established. So you cannot use Chinese money and affiliations and use it to criticize their policy on Tibet or the Uyghurs or their policy in Hong Kong or Taiwan. You can't do that, not allowed at Harvard. So that is the first part, that Chinese presence in places like Harvard. Second part is that they've used this presence to get into India, because Harvard is now in India in a big way. Harvard is in Mumbai. They have a center in Delhi. They are in active collaboration with Piramal on public health and so on. And Chinese influence is there. Chinese are very present in Ashoka University, the China Studies Center in Ashoka University. I've had some nice conversations with people who are involved in India's security, kind of intelligence kind of people, and they are also agreeing that there are a lot of red flags about the China studies going on in certain places in India. But most of all, it's the data gathering. The Chinese equipment with photographs and videos and with facial recognition are like monitoring devices all over India. So China is big in capturing AI, what's very useful for AI, which is big data, capturing data from Indian sources, capturing data automatically, and also from various Indian databases. So a lot of the examples we have given in this book concern the data mining of India that China is doing.
this is a table on page 324 where you talk about the Harvard University's ethics. And then if you just turn the page, we come to this big chart. And Mr. Malhotra was talking about these charts. Indian billionaires, Harvard Vishwaguru, and Breaking India 2.0, where he talks about, of course, and he adds this caveat that, look, successful Indian businessmen have funded Harvard University. Obviously, you don't attribute Malafai the motives, but you do say that they ought to now seriously review or at least investigate what their money is actually turning out. Now, why do you say this?
More than the money, it's their family name. Because if I were Lakshmi Mittal, then imagine Lakshmi Mittal and family, South Asia Institute at Harvard. So a person stands up and makes all this, spits out all this stuff, and on the back, the banner says Lakshmi Mittal and family, South Asia Institute. And he's standing there, he's introduced, his visiting card says he's a professor there, and the conference is named after that family institute. It's their annual conference. You know, I would be very concerned that in my name all this stuff is going on. Sooner or later, people in India are going to find out. It's not going to remain a secret forever. And when they find out, are they going to be upset? If I were in their shoes, I would have an independent annual report. I would bring, like you bring auditors every year to check it out. And their job is to raise red flags. They're not harming you by saying that, Mr. Industrialist, these are some issues in your factory, these are issues in your books. They're actually helping you. Like you go for a physical fitness test and the cardiologist says, do this, do that, here are some problems. He's not trying to harm you, he's trying to help you. So in the same way, what we are doing is a civilizational audit on behalf of these industrialists, saying that as far as Indian civilization is concerned, I mean, you guys are doing a lot of good in India and you're trying to do good in Harvard, but frankly, in your name and with your money are aligned certain speakers, certain thinkers, certain type of dissertations, certain resolutions, certain political movements, which are not very good for India, and you should take a look. And if you like it, fine, it's not my money. I have no right to stop them. I'm not trying to stop them. I'm simply raising an issue. But if you want to continue doing this, continue doing it, but let the people of India know that this is what you want to do. On the other hand, if you're concerned, then do something about it.
Well, that's what my final question to you is about. Look, universities are guilty of the same selectivism as individuals. They have their own biases too, as you've now sort of expounded over the last half an hour. There is a robust left ecosystem, but the intellectual right hasn't been able to sort of create its own Harvard, for lack of a better word.
Yes.
So why crib about it? Let's focus on the solution, which is to create your own ideologically aligned Bharatiya Vedic Harvard.
Absolutely. I would love to see, and I've said this for 20 years, and I would be available in any way to help. I would love to see a Vedic liberal arts university in India. There are these 64 kalas that were taught in the Indian system, you know, everything from debate and philosophy and, you know, the Dharma Shastras, the Arth Shastras, the Natya Shastras, all of that. Those are the liberal arts of India. And India was the Harvard of the time, if you will, because people would come from China, the brilliant scholars from Cambodia, Vietnam, all over these countries would come to India and study this and take it back. I mean, the Chinese accept this, that India civilized China in a big way. The Japanese accept that. I used to have a friend in Columbia University who later moved to Harvard, a Japanese guy called Ruchi Abe, who wrote, he knew what the kind of work I'm doing like 25 years ago. So he gifted me a book called Weaving the Mantra by Ruchi Abe, which is a big, huge book. And it gives the history of Japanese culture and its debt to India. Language, iconography, martial arts, so much thinking that came from not just religion and Buddhism, but so many things that came from there. So, you know, India has been the liberal arts Vishwa Guru at one time for Eurasia, much of Eurasia. Okay. But today, we are a consumer, not a producer of knowledge. And it's not enough to be emotional and be bombastic and have slogans and knock down this and have a riot that. I'm against that. I don't like it when the Hindu right is basically about shouting, screaming down other people, replacing one kind of a dogma and cancel culture with another. I think we need to train intelligent people, and this book is a manual. It's a training manual to help you do that. Please, if you want to do a 1 semester course on this, I'll be happy to come and teach it if you want me to do that, because you need to learn how to argue, what to argue, how to debate in a very civil manner. We need to produce people when they such that when you are facing unreasonable statements from the other side, you are either shouting down and saying, I'll do this or that to you, threats and all that. You should say, give me time, have a neutral, honest moderator, and let's debate and let's be straightforward. If you produce enough people like that, the victory will be far greater for you, far more spectacular, and those people will run because they will not be able to stand your logic and your clarity. That's what we need to do, rather than all this counter cancel culture, which I think is a bad idea.
It's a very good point that Professor has made here. It's a very, very important point. Let me also tell you that there have been others who have argued this point in the past. Conrad Elst comes to mind immediately. Let's intellectualize the right, as he had argued in one of his books about 25 years ago that I had happened to read. So it's very nice to hear the same sentiments from Mr. Malhotra, and of course, through this book, his co-author, both of them, Ms. Vishwanathan, who has joined us here on Link. Thank you very much for watching this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Now I request Professor Abanti Bhattacharya ji, ma'am, a Professor, Department of East Asian Studies and also the mentor of Bharat Book Club, to please deliver the concluding remark and the vote of thanks that also include a few announcements, and the event shall end with the national anthem.
We can take questions.
We can also take a few questions. Yes.
They should get the mic.
Yeah, let's, yes,
So
please.
Bishwa,
There you go.
we need to give the mic.
Gentleman in blue. Yes.
Namaskaram, sir. Sir, many times I have seen, and my friends have also seen, like we are talking on phone, or we are not even talking on phone. We are just talking, and the phone is there. And within 15 minutes or within 30 minutes, we see Instagram ad on the same thing that we were talking.
Yes.
Sir, is this true that all our devices that we are talking are being listened to?
Yes.
Or this is just a conspiracy theory?
No, this is true. This is absolutely true. This is what, I have a book called Artificial Intelligence and the Future of Power. I don't know if they have it outside. It came out last year. AI and the Future of Power, 5 battlegrounds, that goes into all this in great detail.
Hello.
Yeah.
So, sir, a little background. I come from Allahabad University. My graduation was from there. When I came for masters in this university, like before you, ma'am, talked about all LGBTQ and trans issues and the problems that we are facing. So, what I have seen in city, which is not like Delhi, like Allahabad or maybe Lucknow, which is my hometown, we are not like that much prone to the effects of American culture of trans issues, where they are not imposing their pronouns. Here in the campus, as well as, it was new for me, strange as well, that few of the students, when we are gathering and trying to get to know each other, they told that we should also introduce our pronouns as well. Then after that, a few of them identified their genders as non-binary. Then I realized that in Delhi University, people are actually wearing clothes that are gender neutral. So my question is basically this, that what is it in city like Delhi that it is so prone to American culture and American issues? Like it grabs it just immediately as it is started from there.
So some of it is inferiority complex, that we are not good enough and we need some Gora guys to tell us what to do. Because previously it was the British, and now, maybe we should be adopted by Russians or Americans, or Chinese don't want to adopt us. So we are kind of like orphans without parents raising us. We behave like children who need somebody else to tell us. This is unrootedness, lack of being rooted in our own culture, like Vijay was saying. This is the problem. So people are hanging on to any latest fashion that comes from here and there. And tomorrow America may change and they will go to some other direction, then we'll go running after that. This is how stupid it has become. It is not something of Indian origin. We have total respect for LGBTQ and all these people. They've been part of our culture for thousands of years. In fact, in the introduction of this book, I have Deepthi Rao. She's an LGBTQ person in Silicon Valley, and I know her very well. And she has written a very, very nice piece saying that she wants to be a Hindu and she wants to be LGBTQ. But when she joined the LGBTQ movement in the United States for support, they required her to reject Hinduism. They wanted her to become political against her own heritage to be part of the LGBTQ movement in the United States. So the problem that Vijaya was mentioning is the politicization and using the LGBTQ as a weapon against their own heritage. That was the problem, not that we have any issue with the LGBTQ per se. As an individual, the LGBTQ person is a human being like anyone else. They are part of the Leela. They should be loved and they should be allowed to do however they feel. But when they are being told by a foreign agency to organize as a group, become political, and there is this Godrej Cultural Labs, and we've quoted in this book that some of the guys who are representing their LGBTQ are anti-Kashmir movement, anti-Kashmir or Indian position on Kashmir, against the Indian army, etc. That's nothing to do with LGBTQ. So now what you are doing is you're turning a group into a weapon against the nation state, and that's the issue we don't like.
Sir, it's pleasure talking to you. Sir, my question is to you that since we are seeing in the present geopolitical scenario that the countries, especially in particular the India, is being targeted and is being the victim of that IITs and IIMs, as you highlighted, is being targeted because there the intellectual discourse takes place. Sir, what has been the response of the government of India since, as you have highlighted in your book, so there have been the various evidences which you have provided that because these are the national security threat for our country now, because it's hard to imagine that the war is now going to be fought on the grounds and boots putting on the ground, because in the scenario we look at in the world of artificial intelligence, cyber security and threat. So, sir, what has been the response of government of India in this regard? Has there been any initiative taken? Because it ultimately compromises the national security.
No, I understand you repeat, but I understand the point. What's the government response? I understand the point. So the book is very new. We owe them some time to reflect. I brought it to their attention. They recognize that these are issues they have to study. Let's see, let's give them some time. But what's discouraging is that they did not proactively do anything like I have done. It is their job. It's the job of the Culture Ministry, they failed. The HRD Ministry, they failed. The Ministry of External Affairs, they failed. The Niti Aayog people, they failed. The National Security people, they failed. It is the job of all these people to be doing this kind of research, not one man alone at the age of 72 with a wonderful co-author having to do this for myself. It is the job of all these Sarkari people. And so shame on them that they haven't done it or supported me, although I've approached them on many times. Now let's see that the book is out. So the reason I produced the book is I said, I've had it trying to go to the authorities for help, whether it is academic people, whether it is industrialists. I've been to Anand Mahindra's office in Mumbai and mentioned this to him before he funded Harvard. I've been twice to Ajay Piramal's office in the Piramal Tower. So it's not like I haven't tried to talk to them privately. I have, and I've talked to any number of people in the Indian government. I knew Rajiv Kumar, the vice chairman of Niti Aayog, who left recently. I knew him. He was a college friend from St. Stephen's College. So I have tried all that. So I'm writing this book because I said, okay, enough is enough. I'm going to take the matter to the public. So I'm taking the matter to the public. I want all of you guys to get a copy of this, to show that you are backing it, to read, even if you read 1 or 2 chapters, talk about it, be part of our movement, send the message that this matters and the authorities have to take it seriously.
You have highlighted the term cancel culture and also the court legalize it. But what about the view of ban hijab? If ban, then it's also the cancel of culture of one.
Well, loaded question. I won't. I'm not an expert on that. I will just tell you that in Iran they're taking the opposite view. In Iran, the women are going out on the street saying, "We don't want you to impose the hijab on us." So they're taking the opposite point of view. So I honestly don't know all the facts, and I want to only comment where I've done my research. And I think this is a very lively. What I'm glad to note is that in India, this is a lively debate. Nobody's stopping you. I think the debate is lively. Nobody's cancelled those who are for hijab or those who are against hijab in the public discourse. I don't think there's anything stopping
Well,
you.
if I just may add, it's a slight nuance. Actually, the college board in Karnataka is only saying you can't wear the hijab in a classroom, not on campus. You can wear it on campus, you can wear it in society. No one is stopping you from wearing hijab. Only in a secular environment, like, for example, in the military, the police force, or where the uniform takes primacy. So, this is not about cancelling the hijab as a cultural construct. It is only to uphold another cultural construct, which is uniformity and secularism. That's all.
So I express great concern with regard to the use of technology and especially the IT field in our country. For example,
Close.
we are exploring. Sorry.
Bring it close to your mouth and don't move it. Yeah, yeah. Bring it close. Hold it still. Yeah. Hold it.
We are exploring a lot many things. We are getting into wikis. We are getting into new platforms. But when we see the origination or the control of that particular place, so for example, we are having very good work in some particular things. We are getting into search engine optimization. We are getting articles in top search engines. But we are using the server as the AWS. That's the Amazon server. What are the search engines that we are coming on top? Google, Microsoft, Yahoo, all originate in the United States. They have the control to switch on and off. Some particular giant comes to know about particular things that's coming up. They are going to sponsor heavy vendetta. But there are multiple concerns, not just that. For example, there was a platform called Coup that came in.
What is your question? I know about that platform. What
Yes,
you're
sir.
saying, I've written 500-page book on artificial intelligence on this, so I already know all this. But what's your question?
So my question is that should we accept defeat in this particular aspect? Because I don't see any like Niti Aayog had that server, but that server is nowhere, which can be used for the Indian websites. So what is the way out, or do we have to just accept it how it is?
So first of all, the issue is not server. The issue is not server, which is piece of hardware. It is not the location of the server. It doesn't matter. This is the AI software. Who controls the AI software and the machine learning and the algorithms? And that is where India supplies the manpower. We supply the engineers, the software developers, to work for the foreign countries, and those people own the technology and the intellectual property rights. There was a lawyer here from the legal person. So the problem which I mentioned in my AI book is that we are proud that we have a large army of AI people and software people, but we do not own the intellectual property rights that they produce because they're employees working for a foreign country. So as long as that remains the business model, that we have labor, we are selling labor, and they own the work, the intellectual property produced, we will continue having this. And this whole issue that we should own the intellectual property and not just a wage arbitrage, a margin on their hourly rate. And I mentioned this in my artificial intelligence book. That's where you should read that, and you will see my views on how to solve the problem.
Jai Shri Ram, sir. My question to you is, our late CDS Bipin Rawat sir has talked about 2.5 front, in which 0.5 front refers to internal enemies of India. How, sir, what are your views on how should citizens of India should deal with them, and what is the government doing about this?
So the 0.5, which I think is bigger than the other two, in my opinion, is the subject of this. This is what Breaking India 2.0 is, that particular 0.5. So I feel that the first thing we haven't had is a proper diagnosis. So this book is giving you a proper diagnosis. If you have a disease and you've only understood the symptoms and you have not gone to the root cause, then you cannot solve the problem. So this book gives you a diagnosis of the disease, going deep inside where is this problem coming from, and then finding who's funding it, and then those are the people you have to talk to. and the government has to stop hiring those kind of consultants, and the industries have to stop funding those kind of people. So the solutions are there, and the public needs to become more aware and talk more about it. And that's what why I would like you to read this book.
Good evening, sir. What is your take on movies like Adi Purush being made? Because I have big problems with how characters are represented. So, should our epics remain in books only, or should they come out?
So your question is, what about movies that misrepresent Indian culture? And
Should they be reproduced for the youth, or should they remain in books only for us to interpret characters in our own understanding?
No, so the thing is that the part of the narrative that we are fighting is through popular culture. There was a time before there were any movies and all that, there was theatre. So there was Ramayana, there was all these Natashastra, there were all these theatre which were part of the popular culture. So now you have electronic media to do that. So the rules are still the same. You should, those who are interested in the Indian grand narrative should not limit themselves to scholarship and books. You should also get into the popular culture. You should create your own alternative to Netflix. You should create that. I mean, we have got people worth 100 billion. They should put their money into Indian civilization. Some of these people should fund the Vedic liberal arts. They should fund the Vedic version of Netflix. They got the money and they should be doing this. We don't even have an Indian equivalent of Al Jazeera or BBC or Fox News. I mean, Republic TV, fine, it's okay, but you know, there is nothing, it's nothing, or not the same stature internationally, and it's not a full service channel, because if you look at Al Jazeera, you get all the topics in the world, whether it's cricket, whatever it is, they are giving you full service media company. We don't have that kind of a thing promoting our civilization in that direct a way.
So basically, another person from Allahabad University talked about LGBTQ, and then ma'am also talked about, how gender and it being a construct, we don't, Indian culture is much different than that. And then you talked about, how Indian, and that's what I wanted to talk about, like how Indian right has become, with the arguments that we have, it seems to become very similar, because for us, for example, when it comes to gender as a construct, etc., we always talk about it because we as Indians, we have this idea that, you as a person have both the feminine energy and the masculine energy. Again, and another thing that I wanted to talk about was that you talked about...
What's your question? Because it seems like
Yes,
you have a lot to talk about, and next time I would like you to sit here with me and we'll have a conversation. But for now, because time is short, you should please give a question.
Yes, sir. So my question basically is that all of this, the narrative is being controlled by those who have the economic power. You talked about how, people aren't ready to take it up. You went to pyramid and they wouldn't take it up. So what is, and all the elites and all the academicians, all of them, they are all going towards the left, because there seems to be some sort of vested interest, whether it is China, whether it is, people with the money on the left who are coming here and doing this. So what is, according to you, what really is the solution to this? Because you said they wouldn't listen.
Okay.
Like you said, there's money.
So she's saying, how is it that all the money is ending up powering the intellectual ideas of the left and not the right?
Yeah.
That's perhaps
So
what she's saying.
this is an issue we've also... So really, it's a very important question, but you need to answer, say it very clearly. I will restate it the way I understand it. Why are billionaires who made their money in capitalism, which is free market capitalism, funding the left, which will actually dismantle capitalism? That is the question. Why would capitalists fund Marxists who are going to kill capitalism? That's a very big problem. The conclusion chapter in this book answers that, and I want you to read it rather than telling you the story.
Okay. Well, I think we are now going to have the vote of thanks from our mentor.
I'll try to be very, very brief. My name is Sunit Verma. I'm in the Department of Psychology. I have worked with Rajiv ji for long years. I have read all his works except this. And two are very brief comments and a question. One is that when you talk about LGBTQ In India, Rajiv ji's talk has come recently on YouTube, but in India, this was dealt with traditionally. These people were not part of the mainstream and they were looked after by the rulers. They were artisans, basically. Two, the hijab issue. It is unfair because it bans the hijab in the classroom, but not the kada or any other symbols, any other religious symbol. So it is unfair. My question, this debating is important and necessary. After a few years or a couple of years after Being Different came out, the US intellectual tank got together and they tried to corner you. And we need something similar to support your work. I'm working almost entirely on my own. Indian ideas on psychology is all that I teach. My students are sitting here for 20 years now.
I know.
We have a specialization in Indian psychology. My question is that Purv Paksh, Uttar Paksh is essential. But the next step is, as Dr. Kundan Singh says, binaries, us and the other. How to transcend and transform so that we can look at each other as one. That is my question.
So, Purva Paksha, Uttar Paksh is our system. And then after the Uttar Paksh, it depends on the idea of transcending is something mutual. It's not something I go, because if I say here is the transcending, then I'm trying to convert him. That's not fair. So that's a mutual process that I critique you, you critique me, we're discussing, debating, how can we come together and transcend our differences, and that requires partnership between both sides, and that is exactly the final goal we should have. But we need collaborators on the other side, and I'm getting collaborators. You know, I have two forewords, one by a very eminent Indian professor and one by a very eminent American professor. Two forwards. And the reason is that I want to collaborate with the Americans precisely so we can transcend. Thank you very much for the question. Sunit Verma is a dear old friend. He's a head of psychology in this Delhi University. He, as he said, he's read all my books. He's supported me. He's brought me into the psychology department for any number of conferences and talks and workshops. And I'm very glad that I have friends like that. Thank you very much.
I just want to respond to that a little on the idea of transcending, because that's really, really intriguing. And there we are actually, I believe, we are actually trapped in this battle of isms. When we are talking about transcending, there are two sides, us and them. And this is the whole problem of Marxist dialectics. And when we move to Chinese, since I am from the Chinese department, move to the Chinese, they talk about yin-yang philosophy, which actually there are two opposites, but they complement each other. When we look from our philosophy, there is no other. So here, I think we need to go to our philosophy to find, because we don't have the concept of other, because there is no concept of anti-God. When we do not have anti-God, there is no concept of what we say Abheda principle, where Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam concept comes from. So there is the whole space of our own argument. So I think we need to explore this to really find the answer, which is the Indian way, Indian path, not the Chinese construct, not the Marxist, that is Western construct, but to have an Indian way. On this note, I just deliver my vote of thanks, and really feel honored to deliver this vote of thanks. But before I proceed, there are few announcements that need to be made. First, Historical India has received a confirmation from renowned archaeologist and academician, Professor Dilip Chakrabarti, Professor Emeritus of South Asian Archaeology at Cambridge University, a victim of academic intolerance that attempted to downgrade his academic excellence in this very university decades before. It shall be an honor to welcome him back with the utmost respect and admiration befitting his works and contributions in the field of Indian archaeology, his visit shall be probably scheduled in the second week of November. The second announcement, the second walk in the Delhi University Heritage Walk series with a different route is scheduled after Deepavali in the first weekend of November. Details for the same shall be out soon. Third, while a student-driven project on the total political history of India is already in progress, we call upon students and the interested to contribute towards devising another student-driven project announced earlier on the history of the University of Delhi to reconstruct the social history and understanding the university culture, not just through bibliographic research, but also recording popular memory for corroboration. Fourth, the first half of the November shall witness one of the largest academic conclaves in Delhi, Vimarsh, led by Youth United for Vision and Action. Historical India and the Bharat Book Club as academic partners are scheduled to host several dignitaries as part of the conclave, for which the details shall be released soon. And the last announcement, we already have several confirmations from the most famous authors, historians and archaeologists, to name a few: Dr. Vikram Sampath, Padma Shri Dr. Meenakshi Jain, and archaeologist K.K. Mohammed. Their visits to the campus shall be scheduled as per the availability and in New Delhi. On behalf of Historical India and Bharat Book Club, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to Shri Rajiv Malhotra for delivering such a stirring address on his new launched book, Snakes in the Ganga. The book is not to be seen as a ship, but a shore. The ripples that it can set in motion are sure to open avenues for further research and intellectual activity on such significant themes. These civilizational concerns are by no means limited to India. There are many in West itself who are slowly becoming conscious of the dangers posed by this unholy alliance of postmodern and Marxist thought systems. The degrading quality of education systems is a global reality. Activism is increasingly becoming an easy weapon to foment unrest and dismantle the social and cultural fabric of a nation. It is our solemn duty to ask ourselves a question: can we, future academics, take inspiration from Rajiv ji and expand and enhance his line of thinking? To that extent, we are extremely grateful towards the Infinity Foundation for supporting this event. The co-author, Vijaya Vishwanathan, has also played a remarkable role in bringing this significant project to fruition, and we express our gratitude to her for her contributions. We would also like to thank Professor Alka Chawla, PIC, CLC, for lucidly capturing the significance of such discussions on India's history and in her introductory remarks. We are grateful to eminent journalist Sri Rahul Shivshankar for moderating this session in such a seamless manner. It was an enriching experience listening to this conversation, and I'm sure those seated in the audience have several takeaways from this enlightening discussion. Thanks are due to Dr. Vikas Verma for being such an excellent guide for all the members of Historical India. We also thank Ajay ji for always guiding us throughout our plan of action. Thanks also to the Campus Law Center and especially Dr. Seema Singh for this joint venture and helping organize this event with such immaculate efficiency. All the volunteers of Historical India and Bharat Book Club deserves plaudits for their unrelenting efforts in making this event a success. Last but not the least, we are extraordinarily grateful to you, the audience, for gracing this occasion and making this a memorable evening for everyone involved. Once again, thank you all and wishing everyone happy Deepavali in advance.